Shabbat Shalom. In a very new article called What Egypt Couldn't Erase, Joshua Stanton writes, in the centuries of enslavement in Egypt, the Israelites lost so much, not merely by way of freedom and opportunity, but also in terms of identity. A sense of shared oppression must have supplanted some of the positive aspects of how they lived, to say the least. Yet as we enter the book of Numbers this week, with the eponymous Torah portion, Bamidbar in Hebrew, in the wilderness, we learn that the Egyptians could never fully erase the Israelites' sense of heritage and pride in who they once were. The Torah portion explores the process of creating a census for the Israelites, ostensibly to determine their military strength before entering the Promised Land, speaking of war. But the level of detail that it provides, in Numbers chapter 1, verse 2, by the clans of its ancestral houses, listing the names, every male, head by head, indicates a deeper need to reaffirm identity and belonging for a people long discouraged from being anything other than enslaved. One of the more beautiful commentaries on this affirmation comes from the 13th century Spanish intellectual giant known as the Tur. He wrote, "The Torah records the Israelites' ancestral houses and tribal identities. Why? To show that they did not change their names in Egypt. And that is why they are included so carefully in the census in the book of Numbers." In other words, they never stopped being who they were. They carried that identity forward with them. It was in their cells, deep in their DNA. And we can wonder what they might have thought with this new identity as freed men and women, still carrying their selves from earlier years of enslavement. When I got to thinking about that notion of bringing yourself forward with you, it happened to coincide with a lovely conversation group in which I participate every week for 1 hour. It's a sacred hour for me. And the topic this week was, what advice do you wish you could give to your younger self? And I will admit that when I first heard the topic, I thought, ay vey, I'm going to have to go back and revisit parts of my life that maybe I'm not so sure I want to reconfront. I'm not sure I want to take a tour of all the earlier chapters and blunders and sliding door opportunities and roads not taken. I'm not so sure I feel like going back there. And yet, like our ancestors in the wilderness, they had no choice. The Torah reminds them who they were, who they are, and says, let's pause here, take a moment, and reaffirm who we once were, who we are now, and who we might want to be in the future. Heaven knows, and you all know, that there is a great focus these days on mindfulness, on being in the here and now. And it does seem to discourage your thinking about anything other than what you're doing at this present moment. So in a piece by Dr. Susan Kalos-Wiltborn, she called it, "What advice do you wish to give your younger self?" She writes, according to mindfulness experts, you can in fact manage stress more successfully if you stay 100% tuned into your current experiences. If you're having fun, for example, don't think about how disappointed you'll be when the fun is over. If you're feeling anxious, don't negate that feeling, but in fact kind of live in it and try to learn from it. Yes, there are many benefits to living in the moment, but your past is a part of you. And unlike the future, which it is a known factor. Drawing on your past, she suggests, can maybe be more than beneficial in lowering your stress, because the sense of continuity you have about your life over time can help you gain perspective on who you are now and what the possibilities are for your future. There's a new study by Clemson University's Robin Kowalski and Annie McCord. They suggest you can really gain in the present by thinking back to your younger self and pausing about what you wish you knew then. Although I really like the twist that one of my favorite songs, Against the Wind by Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band, to take you back for a minute, I love when he says, I wish I didn't know now what I didn't know then. It's a great twist on that because learning life's lessons can be tough. The lost self, or the person we might have been, is most likely to be tied to a sense of regret. And I think that's what I was hesitating about participating in the conversation about. I didn't want to sit in regret. But over the time of preparation for the group discussion, and then in thinking for Shabbat, really uncovered a tremendous benefit about this. In this study, Kowalski and McCord asked the members of their online sample, about half and half male and female, average age of 40, to provide a list of the top 3 pieces of advice they would give to the self that they were in high school. So I'm going to give you a minute to just take that journey yourself. Most of the advice people give themselves at first glance seems to involve such areas as education, romance, career, finance, health, travel is a big one, and maybe even spirituality for some people. They also asked the participants the intriguing question of what they thought their high school self would think of them now. What would your high school self think of you now? The authors concluded that most people do ask themselves at least once in a while what they would do differently if they knew then what they know now. However, they note, as any parent knows who tries to impart the life lessons they have learned to their teenage children, most of the advice we would offer to our younger self has had to be learned through lived experience. So in the end, is this even a practical or useful exercise? Oliver Berkman in The Guardian cites a study in the Journal of Social Psychology. He says, this is a question that suddenly seems to obsess millions, and which every celebrity is required to have an answer. The question again of what advice would you give your younger self? But he talks about this sense that I was feeling, and I felt very validated, thank you, Oliver Berkman, of people that don't want to do the exercise because it causes, he says, a shiver of regret. People truly wish sometimes that they hadn't done the things they did. And this only brings into focus the fact that regret, while understandable, is fundamentally self-contradictory. The very fact that you're feeling it means that you've grown into the kind of person who can look back on what you did in the past when you were another kind of person, which means that judged by your present values, you've emerged from your life experiences better than before and ought, rationally speaking anyhow, to be happy rather than regretful. And the simple truth, the naked, honest, ugly truth is, we can't change the past. So what is this exercise all about? Berkman suggests that people can find it useful to advise their younger selves as a way of advising their present selves, to bring their current behavior more closely in line with what they've learned. This echoes the well-known observation that adopting a third-person perspective on your problems, thinking or writing about yourself in the third person, can encourage a calmer and less self-castigating, self-berating approach. What would I say to my younger self? Among other things, I would say, don't waste 1 minute, well, maybe 1 minute, but not more than 60 seconds fretting about the college that didn't let you in. It wasn't meant to be for me to wear the Stanford Cardinal, nor for my parents to be in hock to Stanford for the rest of our lives. It wasn't meant to be. I would advise my younger self to walk into the study abroad office and find 10 weeks, 1 quarter, to learn somewhere else. Still hoping for that, while I have strength to do it. There are a couple people I would advise myself, don't let them get away. They won't even be on Facebook one day and you'll never know what happened to them. But finally, and it's a long list, but if I have to pare it down, and I invite you to do the same. It was an activity I actually didn't want to do, but I'm really grateful we did. I would tell particularly my 17-year-old self, because boy, that seems to be the fulcrum on which many of these studies rest, that it's okay to not be a fully realized person when you're 17. That yes, other people will look more finished than you, more adept at different subjects and more confident and realized in life. But everyone is wounded and everyone's on a journey. And as one of my favorite singers, Tom Chapin, wrote in a song that's written for children and families, but is for all of us, he says, "May you grow in your own sweet way and blossom more every day and follow the music in your heart. May there be time for you to grow. Take that time, explore, enjoy. Don't be so hard on yourself. If you're lucky, there's a long road in the wilderness ahead. Take everything that's wonderful, learn from what isn't, and just keep putting one foot in front of the other." Oliver Berkman concludes, he says, go to the real question. Not how would you advise your younger self, but how would you advise a beloved friend? Because the issue, after all, isn't what you might have done differently. It's what you do now. If you treated yourself with half of the kindness and goodwill you unhesitatingly extend to your favorite relatives or friends. For many people, yeah, this is a big challenge. But unlike changing the past, which is impossible, being kind to yourself and to those you love, and maybe even those with whom you have yet to forge a positive bond, that at least has the enormous advantage of being possible. In this wilderness, let's embrace the possible and keep going ahead, together and comfortably with ourselves. Shabbat Shalom.